Since changing the name of the Eclectic Americana Friday morning drive time radio show on January 20th, 1989 to the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club, the DJs in the collective have strived to entertain and inform our listeners. Airing from 6 to 9 a.m. Pacific at KZSC 88.1 FM in Santa Cruz, California, the Bushwhackers usually have 2 interviews a week, each airing for about half an hour. We're not afraid to ask questions or admit that we don't know something, and we don't mind taking deep dives or following a tangent as we get into how sausage is made in local, county, or state politics, as well as learning about things going on in our community or discussions with artists. Our interviews are not scripted and are co-produced by myself, Dangerous Dan Orange, and Sleepy John Sandage. Good morning, KZSC, you're on the air.
Good morning.
It's California State Senator John Laird. What district do you represent?
The 17th, even after redistricting.
And I understand you've relinquished parts of South Santa Clara County thanks to the good times, and you've added San Benito County. Is that the whole county that you've added?
Yes, and also Salinas and the Salinas Valley.
Interesting.
And the one thing to say, just before that discussion goes on too far, is the Senate is different than the Congress and the Assembly because they have 2-year terms. So they represent the districts they were elected to in 2020 until December of this year. And then in November, whoever wins will get elected to the newly redrawn districts. In the Senate, we have 20 people up 1 year and 20 people up 2 years later. So I will represent the district I was elected to till December 2024. So I will represent southern Santa Clara County for another 3 years. And if I'm elected to the new district, I will pick up representing the new areas in December 2024. But the interesting nuance is that the San Benito and Salinas in the Salinas Valley will be unrepresented for 2 years. They're represented now by a senator whose term ends this December, and then they wouldn't be in a district until December 2024. So the Senate has a process where it takes those large unrepresented areas and assigns them to a senator to cover for those 2 years. And so there's a good chance I will be assigned this December to represent San Benito County and Salinas in the Salinas Valley, which would mean, if that happens, for 2 years, I would represent 1.25 million people rather than roughly 950,000.
So this redistricting in California, it's done by a committee that's got equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, and I think 4 unaffiliated people. It sounds like there's been a bit of change on the Senate side, but there's been big changes on the California Assembly and the U.S. House of Representatives. Specifically, the Assembly districts, Mark Stone is going to add Morgan Hill and Los Gatos, but he's going to lose parts of South County, including Watsonville. Robert Rivas is going to have Gilroy and Salinas Valley, which he's had. But there's now going to be a new district that extends from Live Oak on the east side of Santa Cruz all the way down to San Luis Obispo, and it's going to be represented by Jordan Cunningham from Templeton. So you have an assembly district that is representing Watsonville, Salinas, and the Salinas Valley instead of having them or having Watsonville together with Santa Cruz the way it's been and the way it is in your Senate district. Why do you...
And actually, one correction.
Go ahead.
Robert Rivas has represented Watsonville now. Watsonville is being split off of Jimmy Panetta's. And the other thing is that Santa Cruz, as you described, Santa Cruz County is now going to be in 3 different assembly districts. And it is the smallest county and territory except for the city and county of San Francisco. That, in my view, that is ridiculous.
Is there any hope that this can be changed? How do people make their voices heard? It's
finalized.
Oh, boy.
And the only question is whether somebody mounts a court suit, but I think it is that is unlikely to succeed. And the bottom line is an interesting one, which is the The ballot measure that the voters adopted that moved it to this process and away from the legislature drawing its own districts said that communities of interest had to be taken into consideration. This time, the group redefined community of interest because before it was really don't divide cities, don't divide counties, and this year it is much more ethnic. And so one of the reasons that Jimmy Panetta's district got sliced up is because just to the east of it is a strongly Latino congressional district. And that strongly Latino congressional district in the community interest of cities and counties makes no sense. It goes from King City to downtown San Jose. There's not a community of interest between King City and downtown San Jose. And one of the reasons that Salinas and the Salinas Valley and San Benito came into the Coastal Senate District is because the other part of Ana Caballero's district, which is over in the Central Valley, is part of two new predominantly Latino Senate districts in the Central Valley. And they worked really hard to create those, and then everything else around them changed. The interesting thing with regard to the Senate district is this is back to the future. This is very close to the district that Bruce McPherson was first elected in 1996, that Henry Mello represented in the 1980s and 1990s. It is a Central Coast district that is all of San Benito, all of Santa Cruz, all of Monterey, and the northern 80% of the population of San Luis Obispo County. And while San Luis Obispo is with the Senate district in the beginning of that period I mentioned, in the later period it was southern Santa Clara that sort of was the evener to round out the population with Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito. So I have the one district that keeps intact the Monterey Bay Area. All the rest just really divided up.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. This is redistricting is every 10 years after the census. I shed a tear for Watsonville because I think Jimmy Panetta has done a fantastic job representing the Salinas Valley, and to color it on racial and ethnic grounds seems to imply that you have to be of that community to represent that community, and I think Jimmy Panetta's track record would prove otherwise. Yes,
and it's for example, he and I have been really close partners on the Pajaro flood project,
right.
The Pajaro River, and people will remember, listeners that were around in the 1990s, that there was this rather horrific flood, and the levee broke on the Pajaro side, and Pajaro was completely flooded, and hundreds of people were out of their homes. And since then, the river has only had 5-year flood protection, meaning, a big storm that would happen is now likely to happen every 5 years. It is really in danger of another flood. If it continued raining in this month and next month in March the way it has rained in October and December, there will be real danger in the Pajaro area. And so the Army Corps of Engineers, Jimmy Panetta has really whipped them into shape. They have funded the federal part of the flood project. Mm-hmm. And then last year I did a bill because they were having a real tough time financing the local share. And I did a bill where the state bought out the local share, and the state and the feds together will fund the entire project. Well, we've worked in partnership. He's been in the middle of that. They will have a flood project due to the efforts of both of us, and that is really good representation. That is what is supposed to happen. And so, and I think, Leon Panetta, Jimmy's father, was elected first in 1976 and served till 1993, and Jimmy got elected in 2016, I believe it was. And there's never been a time when that congressional district of Jimmy Panetta, Leon Panetta, Sam Farr did not have Salinas and the Salinas Valley and Watsonville in it. This will be a totally new thing for that congressional district in modern times.
Yeah, it's potentially politically incorrect to say that you don't have to be of that ethnic or racial group to represent them, but I think that that legacy that you just mentioned, Leon Panetta, Sam Farr, Jimmy Panetta, and you have done a fantastic job representing Watsonville and the Salinas Valley. And I just hope that, whoever ends up in the next election representing them, that they do just as well. Let's turn our attention.
Well, just one last thing.
Go ahead.
That, and that is because I've sort of said to Watsonville, geez, I have 21 cities. I just did this incredibly heavy lift on the flood bill because that was almost impossible. It's like I can't be doing this every year. And right now, I am gutting and amending a bill for Watsonville Hospital, and I'm determined in the next weeks, together with Robert Rivas, Mark Stone, and Ana Caballero, that I'm taking the lead to move that through on an urgency basis. So it'll require two-thirds in both houses, and it creates a district so that a Watsonville Hospital district can buy the Watsonville Hospital from bankruptcy court and keep it from closing. Once again, it is, we're stepping up to do what's right for Watsonville, and I'm going to take every legislative machination I have to move that bill so that it's on the governor's desk by early February. And I spent most of yesterday and the day before on the phone with committee chairs, leadership, really lining it up to be able to do that. And it makes your point, which is that it's more important to make sure that there's good representation and, whether it's safety from floods or it's whether making sure that the hospital care for a disadvantaged community that employs 200 physicians and 600 people doesn't go away.
If you're just joining us, folks, we're talking to California State Senator John Laird. John, that hospital bill, that was a bill you had parked in the House that had passed out of the Senate, so it had left its House of origin, but it was not acted on, so that allowed you to modify it before it went further in the House. Is that correct?
No, your first statement is exactly right. I moved it over there, and to be really honest, right now it's about sea level rise, and so I'm going to reintroduce, quite likely, the sea level rise bill in the Senate. But this was the vehicle I had, and so I'm amending into it the hospital district. The amendments are at the desk. I talked to the local government chair. The speaker has signed off on this process, and so I think it'll be amended in Monday or Friday this next week. It'll immediately be referred to the local government committee. They'll have a hearing. I spent 45 minutes on the phone yesterday on a Zoom with the chair of the local government committee, and it then goes to a committee in the Senate after it passes the assembly floor, and yet it can't be amended because it'll just be agreeing with the amendment. So last night late, I talked to the committee chair and said, I really want your staff to engage. I want any amendments you want that I can take them in the assembly so that we can just move the bill when it comes over to the Senate. So, and there's all these issues about this needs to be purchased by March 28th or else it closes. And so we can't wait for elections for a board for a hospital district. So the bill says that the Board of Supervisors should appoint the governance, and within a matter of a few years, the districts will be drawn and elections will be held. It draws the district along the lines of the Pajaro School District, but carves out Aptos, or most of Aptos. So it's really the Pajaro Valley that's in this hospital district, and it crosses lines, so it goes into Monterey. And the local people have had meetings with the LAFCOs of both sides to make sure that they're comfortable with this, and if there's changes, they know there's a commitment to make changes to the boundary going forward. So
LAFCO?
We're really doing all these hard things to make sure that this option exists to keep the hospital going in Watsonville.
Got it. LAFCO, help me out.
A local agency formation commission, it considers boundaries of any district or any city and the changes thereto.
Got it. Okay. Never afraid to get into how sausage is made with Senator John Laird. Can we talk about SB 620?
Sure.
Because your district includes Paso Robles, San Luis Obispo, Santa Cruz, many of the distilleries in California, I found out that there are over 2,000 craft distilleries in the U.S., over 150 in California, the most of any state. You got a whole bunch of them in your district, and this bill is seeking to get parity between spirits and wine, where distilleries could ship direct to consumer. And since I know it's in the GO, the Governmental Organization Committee right now, they're going to have a hearing on Tuesday. This bill has to get out of its House of Origin, which is the Senate, by the 30th. So if it makes it through the governmental organizational hearing next Tuesday, and it gets out by the 15th, then I think it's going to your committee, Appropriations, and it affects your constituents. Full disclosure, Bonnie and I own 18% of a distillery in Soquel, Osakalis, one of the oldest independent distilleries in the country. So that's full disclosure. Let's talk about SB 620 and how sausage is made.
And the just to add to your description, it really allows direct to the seller shipments, and there had been generally in California, it's changed over time, the idea that there needs to be a third party, there's not direct shipments, it involves alcohol and spirits, and then it had gradually changed in some parts of the alcohol world. The reason that it's an issue now is in COVID, the governor actually did some kind of executive order that just allowed for the direct shipment. And this bill was trying to actually change the law. And a number of us signed a letter to the governor asking him to do this and to extend this last year. And this bill was introduced by Senator Allen, who represents sort of Santa Monica and the coastal areas in the Los Angeles area. And for some reason, he didn't move it out of the Government Organization Committee last year. And my take is that he didn't move it because he didn't think he had the votes. And now, as you say, he has the deadline at the end of the month. I'm supportive of this bill, and it's got three hurdles. It's got to get out of the Government Organization Committee, it has to get out of the Appropriations Committee, and then it has to get off the floor. And if it doesn't get off the floor, as you say, by the last day of January, the bill dies. That's the 2-year session. In a 2-year session, if you have a bill the first year and it doesn't get out of the House, you can get it out of the House in the first month of the next session. And the author has the ability to reintroduce the bill this year if it doesn't get out. But if it doesn't get out, he has to figure out what will be different about the bill to be able to move it.
Well, given the fact that California has the most distilleries of any state in the U.S., this bill actually has, to me, some larger implications, because a couple of years ago, New York passed a law that said New York wineries could ship wine direct to New York consumers, but no other wine from any other state could. And that ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court in the Grenholm case. And the U.S. Supreme Court said to New York, no, not so fast. You have two choices. You can either ban direct-to-consumer shipping for everybody, but if you allow New York wineries to ship to New York customers, then every state has to be able to ship to New York customers. And what it did is it took the small winery world and suddenly exploded their opportunity to ship wine to consumers as long as there's parity between the states. So if a state bans shipping to consumers, then they can ban everybody. But if a state allows shipping to consumers, they have to allow other states to do so as well. And if that extends to distilleries, and California has the most distilleries of any state in the country, then this potentially has a huge benefit to, California distillery industry.
I couldn't add anything to that. That's exactly right, except one thing. It is a larger parity issue because certain parts of the alcohol industry are allowed direct shipment, not just craft breweries and distilleries have not been allowed that. So this does parity to that compared to other parts of the alcohol industry. And so it just makes sense. So I'm going to work on its passage. And I think that the tough place will be the Appropriations Committee. And we have an arcane process that we've described before. So we'll just see what happens when it gets there.
Well,
I'm gonna talk to the chair of the committee.
Excellent. We're tickled to hear that you're supportive. Our fingers are crossed. We'll be when next we talk at the beginning of February, we'll find out what happened and where the dust settled. This may not be directly in your wheelhouse, but Joe in Santa Cruz is bringing up an issue that I've read quite a bit about in letters to the editor in both the Good Times and the Sentinel, and that is about residential solar and changes being proposed that would decrease the revenue that people get for their residential solar and disincentivize residential solar at the same time that California is trying to go green and go, 100% renewable. Do you have any visibility of this and any discussion of exactly what's going on and who's making these calls?
Yes, and it is in my wheelhouse. It's just not in my decision right now because this is in front of the Public Utilities Commission, which regulates energy companies, and they're the ones that are considering this change. And I am joining other legislators in signing a letter saying, please, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so my name will be on a letter that opposes the way they're doing these changes. But and it's my understanding, I have to clarify it, it's my understanding that this is going forward. So if somebody had a benefit by doing solar to date, their benefit doesn't get taken away. It's for people that invest in solar going forward. I have to clarify that that's actually true. But the utility companies have always had this problem with the so-called net metering, and their problem is they believe they always have to be ready to serve. That if there's a day where there's no wind and no sun, and suddenly all the renewables aren't there, they have to have the capability of meeting the complete needs of the grid. And so that's their argument. But the real issue is exactly what you said. I am chairing a Senate working group that's not really public. We're meeting privately at this point on climate to try to figure out things that we can do on climate. And we're nearing that horrible tipping point of the world's climate. It's urgent. We have to do things. It's not the time to step back from anything. And there has been an argument. There was a very controversial bill done by Lorena Gonzalez this last year that didn't get out of the assembly that would have attacked the system because her contention is that lower income people couldn't qualify for solar, and this was a subsidy to upper income people. Well, what's happening is that the gap is rapidly closing for any number of reasons. Assistance in doing solar and other things, the gap is closing between sort of income levels and who's able to do solar, and that should be our challenge. Our challenge should be making sure there's equal opportunity to do the solar, not that we're cutting back on the subsidies for those people doing solar. And so if this isn't changed at the Public Utilities Commission, I'm sure there's going to be some attempt in the legislature to address this, but I don't know what that will be, and it depends on what they actually adopt. And to be honest, I don't know if there's the political will in the legislature. I assume there is, but we're all sitting there waiting to see what they do and trying to weigh in to keep them from doing the worst thing now at the PUC. And then I think people will take stock. And it is supposedly supposed to happen before the February 18th bill introduction deadline. So we would have time to introduce a bill and respond if it was something that needed a response.
Well, given what I'm seeing in the newspapers, and there's quite a bit of anxiety about this. I'm glad to hear you're co-authoring a letter. I understand it's at the PUC and affects things going forward, but we need more solar, and we'll be revisiting that. Now, speaking of climate, Bonnie and I got a flyer in the mail, 8.5 by 11, nice cardboard, from the California Environmental Voters Education Fund, thanking you for your climate courage. Did you know about this before it came out, or did it surprise you?
No, same thing happened to me. I got one in my mailbox, and I went, wow. And for your listeners, the environmental voters for decades were known as the League of Conservation Voters until just a few months ago. And so it is that group. And what happened is we had a very difficult bill in the legislature on climate. I floor managed it on the last day of session. It was by Al Mertzucci, and it would have increased our goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And it was very controversial. The building trades really fought it, and environmental justice advocates fought it. And so in the Senate, which has 40 members and it takes 21 votes to pass, it only got 14 votes. And so they did mailers to the districts of anybody that voted for that bill. And you see, the 14 of us in the Senate that voted for that bill lost our 100% labor voting record because the Labor Federation accepted the recommendation of the building trades that be classified as a bad vote. And so, I don't know, I had a 92% labor record because I voted for that climate bill. And I think they felt the need to push back and to let people know that there's actually support for dealing with climate. And so I appreciated it, but I was as surprised as you were when it arrived. And it's always funny when they do that and it's independent expenditure. They go to your Facebook page or some page and they claw down a picture and they do stuff. And so that's always confusing, too, when it's got one of your pictures on it that, you took. They've clawed it down and they've added it. So it just, my spouse, I think, got it in the mailbox and said, have you seen this? You're not running right now. What's going on? So.
Oh, there you go. So you're one of the 14. It's not about anything coming up. Knowing you, John, you're not going to change going forward in terms of your support for the climate, but it's nice to know that it was not coordinated and it made you blush as well. It's KCSC Santa Cruz, the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club. I'm Dangerous Dan, and we're talking to California Senator John Laird. We've got the KPFA News coming up in a couple of minutes. This interview has been co-produced by myself, Dangerous Dan Orange, and Sleepy John Sandage. We got 2 minutes left. John, do you have any other bills that need to leave their house of origin? Do you want to talk to us about new bills? 2 minutes. Floor is yours.
I think that it's in the climate group, I'm really working to see if there can be an agreement that we can bridge the ideological and political gaps in the Democratic caucus to support things. And we've been having stakeholder meetings. Today is the 7th. We've met with environmental justice, building trades, broader labor unions, broader environmental groups. Today we're meeting with business groups. We met with oil and energy. We're working our way through trying to find out where there's an agreement. And I know I'm probably going to do a bill that actually sets up a climate dashboard so everybody can go and actually see where we are against our goals at a different time. But the larger bills are waiting for this process to conclude. So there will be something, and it might not be the next show, but the show after it, I'll be able to talk specifically about what those are.
So that's going to be one of your 10 bills for this second year of the legislative session.
I actually have more. We were limited last year to 12 bills, and I had introduced 17, and you're allowed 40 in a 2-year session. So theoretically, I'd introduce as much as 23 more bills, and I have 2 on each floor, and I'm going to move the 2 off the Senate floor so that I have them in the Assembly, and one of the 2 on the Assembly floor is going to turn into the Watsonville Hospital bill and then move back.
Interesting. California State Senator John Laird, I love learning how sausage is made in our legislative process, in our lengthy discussions and deep dives. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. And A listener just said we are so fortunate to have John in Sacramento. There you go. John Laird, thank you so much. We'll be talking to you first Friday of next month. Stay tuned for the KPFA Morning News. Have a great morning. Be well. Stay safe, and we'll be talking to you.
Right. Take care.
You've been listening to a podcast from an interview on the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club on KZSC 88.1 FM in Santa Cruz, California. This interview has been co-produced by myself, Dangerous Dan Orange, and Sleepy John Sandage. Groovy Gabe Orange helped get this interview into podcast format. KZSC is a student-run college and community non-commercial educational radio station broadcasting from the UC Santa Cruz campus. You can stream KZSC online at kzsc.org. Thanks for listening.